I would like us all to just quickly turn on our cameras and show what we will be working on. I cheated and got a head start, but go ahead, even if it's not one of Christine. Oh my gosh, so many of us did the same one. Oh, that's hilarious. Obviously, there's a favorite going on. Great. Oh my gosh, this is really funny. I love it. So we all kind of think alike. This is fantastic. Okay, so I'm going to start sharing my screen then. And here we go. And share. Great. Can everyone see that? Yes. Awesome. Thumbs up. Fantastic. All right, so I am going to introduce tonight's artist, which is Christina Nicodema, if my computer and technology will cooperate. Give me 1 second. There we go. Okay, so Christina is a painter who lives and works in Brooklyn, New York. She graduated from Parsons School of Design in 2009. She spent almost a decade as a set designer and art director for animated films and television before switching to painting. And in her spare time, Christina is an undefeated amateur boxer, which is, I think, really cool. Christina's work, which we will go into more shortly, as you can see here on the screen, explores life via a discussion and questioning of the food chain. Her intricate compositions read life through the millennial lens, questioning the past, present, and future. Christina has shown in galleries and art fairs throughout the United States, including New York, Texas, and Los Angeles, and now here at AEIVA with the new a la carte exhibition. She was also featured in an article in ArtNet in February. So we're really excited to have you, Christina. Thank you so much for being a part of this. And let's go ahead and get started. So welcome. Thank you for being here. And tell us, how did you get into art? So you did a whole career in something else first. Why did you decide to go with art?
Well, okay. Hey, hi, everybody. I'm Christina. Thank you all for being here tonight. And Christina, to answer your question, how did I get into art? Well, I have been drawing and painting really my entire life. Drawing was kind of the first activity I got into as like a really, really young kid, and I drew obsessively as a small child. And I worked for a number of years working as a designer for animation and doing art direction and sets. So I became really digitally fluent. I had this skill set of drawing and painting, but I became like very computer design heavy in my career as a set designer and art director. But I always knew that I had to be an artist, and that was really what I wanted to do. So I ended up leaving design sort of very abruptly and just pursuing painting full time. And it ended up working out really well, because when I was developing the body of work that you guys see today, having this very digitally fluent skill set allowed me to sort of combine that with painting and come up with something that felt like very contemporary to me. And it allowed me to arrive at the paintings that you see today.
Awesome. And so who or what inspires you?
Oh my gosh, so many things. To answer that question, I mean, I can talk to you like what I'm thinking about as sort of the underpinnings of what this work means for me, what I'm saying with it.
Let's start with, since we've got the Raft of the Medusa up.
Sure.
This painting.
Yeah.
Maybe let's start with the art history side, because you do have a few where art history kind of impacts it. So for everyone on the call, this is Christina's painting, but Raft of the Medusa is actually an important work from art history, which is, if I can get this to work, this one. It is from the 19th century. So tell us why and kind of how you got to this and why art history inspires you.
So art history is really important to me, certainly as an underpinning of the work, but I think it's really important for artists to have an understanding of who came before them and what has, and just the movements that have happened and what has sort of paved the way to allow us to make what we make today. So I think you really need to be informed about all of just like the sort of infinite ocean of work that came before us. This specifically Raft of the Medusa by Jericho is sort of depicting the aftermath of a wreck of a French naval ship, and this is like one of my favorite paintings. It was really inspiring to me, but I reference artists and periods in our history for a variety of reasons, and it could be I like somebody conceptually or compositionally, or because of just the way that they're using the material. So I'm painting in oil. So some of the work that I'm looking at in art history could be the Dutch Golden Age painters, Hieronymus Bosch, even up through like Wayne Thiebaud, for somebody more modern. So I'm looking and I'm pulling from all of these different periods and different people making this work, and it's influencing what I'm doing today, along with how I'm sort of incorporating the internet as a palette and sort of medium for this.
Yeah, I'm just giving us a kind of a more
detailed
view of this one in particular. So you mentioned the internet. Let's go ahead and talk about your concept then. What are you thinking behind these?
Yeah, okay. So some of what I'm thinking about with this work, it starts with, I'm really exploring these schisms of the food chain that we're all participants in, whether we like it or not. We exist in a greater food chain, and there is this hierarchy to living beings on the planet, from plants to animals to humans. And it is a seemingly arbitrary hierarchy of living beings, and how we define that can change over time and from culture to culture. What we perceive as food, what is an insect or a pest that we want to exterminate or squash, what is our family pet, and how we treat all of these living things. And so that is really interesting to me. And as human beings, we're capable, on the one hand, of being so sort of connected and oneness and empathetic, and also, on the other hand, so barbaric and violent. And there's sort of this impossibility of reconciling those two ways of being for humans. And this idea that we inevitably must take life to sustain life. And that is a very sort of uncomfortable fact that we seem to have a spiritual issue with, and we struggle with that. So I source the internet, and what I mean by exploiting the millennial lens is, so I'm a millennial, and people from my generation, certainly the younger generations, really grew up with the internet and as a way of communication and receiving information, and we're sort of bombarded by color and imagery and content 24/7. And so I treat the internet as this sort of societal collective unconscious, because it is something that connects all of us all over the planet. So I'm sourcing from social media and Google searches and this informational overload, the collective id, if you will, and I am bringing these things into the computer, into Photoshop, and sort of mashing them up together and transforming them and creating these new compositions and spaces that are evocative of some of these ideas that I'm thinking about. And then I take them to paint. And that is an entirely separate part of the process, where I'm then thinking about, how do I take this very digital landscape, something that came from the world of the internet, and make it about paint? And what does it mean in paint? And how do I treat it? And how do I destroy it? So I'm making choices. What do I do away with completely in the composition? What do I abstract? What do I enhance? What do I paint maybe sort of realistically? So I vacillate in the work, and you can really get this when you see the works in person, between this sort of high-low resolution. So some things are painted pretty tightly, and then it can get more loose and abstract. So I'm employing a variety of different painting hands and painting techniques, and making it into a coherent hand, I guess. So I'm developing language through that.
So let's use this one as an example, because this one is also influenced off of another art historical painting, the Shipwreck.
Yeah.
And so you can see this one, the Shipwreck, back here, and this is by a Russian painter. Then you have it here. So why the Shipwreck, and then what's the significance here?
Sure.
Yeah.
So the artist is a lesser known artist from art history, Ivan Aivazovsky, and this artist lived during the 1800s in Russia, and he was sort of considered one of the greatest masters in marine art. And most of the work today is in Russian, Ukrainian, or Armenian museums. So he's perhaps a lesser, widely known name in art history. However, I sort of appropriated and transformed this image as a way of talking about content on the internet, and the mashup and collage, and the way we view even paintings today. We're looking at it on the internet, and that was never like how it was intended to be experienced, right? So I'm like taking it and mashing it up and repainting it. It's in this new scene, and in this scene we have all of these Arctic snow monkeys in this sort of pool temple scape, and it's very dreamlike and sort of surreal. And the monkeys, animals are all really super interesting to me, because I think about this idea of like, why do animals move us the way that they do, and why do we emote the way that we do when we experience an animal? And it sort of raises this question to me: is it because we are seeing a part of ourselves in them, or experiencing empathy or common emotion? If we zoom in, we can see these very human sort of behaviors in the monkeys, and that really struck me. Like the seated monkey is a mother, and she unfortunately is mourning over her deceased infant, and that really struck me as like a powerful thing that we can really relate to as humans. This grieving, this grief that we all understand too well. And then, some of the other little guys are bathing each other and being kind of tender, and just interacting with each other. And I also do delve into this idea of the maternal instinct, which is an interesting concept to me, because we talk about mothering and femaleness and female energy. Certainly in our cultures, it's very soft and loving, nurturing energy, and there's all of those things, but it's also the most sort of dominating and primal and powerful energy that I think there is. Like what a mother does to create life inside her, and to birth this very brutal and violent process of giving birth, and then nurturing and nursing her baby from her own body, and what a mother would do to protect her child. It's an incredibly powerful thing.
Hey, Christina, I have a question from the chat.
Yeah, of course.
From Cynthia: to what degree do you reimagine historical pieces to connect to new audiences? Are you more or equally motivated to convey a message, address an audience/viewer, etc.?
So can you repeat the question for me?
Yeah.
And
Do you want me to explain what I was talking about?
sure, yeah.
Of course, Cynthia.
So I'm a writer. And
Okay.
so when I sit down to put together a piece, I'm usually taking an ongoing conversation and going, they really haven't looked at it from this angle. Or I almost always think about where can I insert discourse? And then I think about the audience. Like, what might the effect of this be on a particular audience? And then I start to shape the piece around that. So when you were talking about drawing on historical paintings, I'm just wondering, because you talk a lot about millennials and how they might be immersed in both the same and different issues at a varied point in time. Are you do you equally think about, I want to direct this towards a millennial audience and I want to convey this, or do you think about, I want to convey this thing, and then, wouldn't that be interesting from a millennial perspective? So I'm asking about that question of, does one of those, I guess from where I am, one of those rhetorical strategies, one of those artistic strategies, does one of those predominate over the other, or do they happen in tandem?
So okay. So I would say I'm not looking to connect with like just millennials. Millennialism is a way of sort of pinning down some of what my lens is and my experience, right, being of this generation. But I'm more connecting or trying to connect to really everybody, because these are human questions, right? I'm looking to create conversation really with everybody, because we're all experiencing it, regardless of our generation, right? We all are dealing with our relationship to food, into the planet, and we're all sort of immersed in this weird sort of fever dream of the internet. So it's really for everybody. And I guess also, to answer your question, I don't sit down so much to make a painting and say, I want to convey this message exactly in a literal way. It's more of an intuitive process than that, and it's more like I'm evoking a number of things, and not always so literally, but there's places for us to go in the conversation and talk about. Does that sort of answer your question?
Yes, it does.
Okay.
Because I'm very much a writer and very much not an artist. So I always think about those kinds of things,
Sure. Yeah.
Content come in, and because you're right. I mean, many times when I sit down to write as well, it's an intuitive thing. It just all kind of pours out, and then I start to look at it, and when I'm beginning to shape it, I guess for a more commercial purpose, that I then okay, who can I think about this conversation with, sort of thing. So
right.
Okay, yeah, thank you.
Yeah, great.
So that kind of leads me to another question that just kind of popped to my mind. In your animal choices and such, how does the millennial? So when I think of the millennial lens, we're a generation that's kind of in between. We're starting to become very more preoccupied with the future of the planet, and I feel like that we're also very much, or some of us are more digitally native, and so we're living on the internet. We're seeing all this information from social media and such. So it's almost like it's creating some anxiety. And so, does that play into your animal choices in particular? But how else does it play into this? Because I mean, this right here is a Congo African gray, and this was a bird that used to be traded a lot. And it's now, if you own a gray, it has to be born in captivity. You can't take it from the wild anymore, because it's a protected species to keep it off the endangered species list. So how do your animal choices play into that? But then also, how does it play into the food chain? You kind of went into that a little bit more earlier, but yeah.
Okay, so so you mentioned addiction. Well, you didn't say addiction, you said anxiety, but certainly the internet and our life on social media is fueled by it. It's you can kind of see all of our anxieties and addictions and fears and fixations and obsessions and fetishes on full display. So that's the internet sort of is like a little window into all of these things in society. And the animals I choose, I mean, they take me on. I mean, I'm always sourcing and looking for animals that are just beautiful and interesting and are fascinating to me. But this is all over Instagram. I mean, we're obsessed with visuals and content and imagery, and even like, you know, why are cats such a thing on the internet? We're obsessed with cat memes and exotic animals. So I'm looking at all of these things that just get posted in this weird void of the internet, and I'm taking them, and then I go down all of these roads of research when I'm investigating all of them and like what they are and our relationships to them. So I am not picking just exotic animals or just it's really all animals, and I'm giving them equal play because we're so used to compartmentalizing and creating like categories and hierarchies for all of these different things, like what animals are acceptable to consume as food, what are not, what do we consider pets that we treat like family members, or what are we utterly repulsed and disgusted by. So I'm taking all of these living beings from all of these areas of this food chain and this sort of arbitrary hierarchy of how we have assigned value to living things, and I'm sort of giving them equal play. And then in these mashups, you see things placed in very unexpected ways, and you start to draw connections, and maybe they're not always so literal, but it's evocative and it gets you. And sometimes the connection is just an intuitive feeling that you get, and it resonates somehow.
Stan, we have a couple questions from the
Sure.
chat.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
All right, so from Natalie, I noticed that in both works there's a triplet of primates. Is that meant to convey a particular message?
A triplet.
So three
Like
up
a grouping
here, three up here, and then you had multiples. So three down here. Well, I guess there's actually four, but three right here.
Well, right. And see, that's something that was like more of an unconscious choice to put trios. Some of them, they're like these family units. In this particular one, in the shipwreck painting, if you zoom into the top left corner, you see that family, and there's a baby breastfeeding from her mother. So I do work with a lot of maternal imageries talking about this like mother-child relationship, because that's something that's super relatable to us, and when we see it in an animal, we're sort of awed by it, and it resonates with us because that is something that is so human to us. You know, trios throughout our history are often symbolic of like the Holy Trinity, and we see that throughout history. That's not necessarily what I'm doing, but the threes have, you know, a variety of significance, but I didn't make it to mean that necessarily.
Well, and also a kind of a triangle shape is a very strong, visually attractive shape as well. So, you know, whether it's conscious or unconscious,
Mm-hmm.
It probably served something to the composition for you.
Sometimes it's just about how I needed to balance a composition, so like it felt resolved to me.
Yeah.
Great. Thank you, Christina. I've got a couple more questions.
Yeah,
if that's
sure.
Okay, from the chat. So from Lindy, as an artist, when you are creating a piece, how do you want the story to be understood? Art can be interpreted in so many different ways, which I think is what makes it so special, because everyone can bring a new idea to the piece. Do you want your work or an artist's work to be able to be used to discuss real world topics in a raw and free way?
Yeah, 100%. I do want it to be used to discuss. That's exactly what I'm doing. I think art is a conversation above anything else. And it is meant for us to engage with each other in conversation and be able to have discourse about these topics. So I can tell you what I'm thinking about when I'm making this work, but I won't tell you what it's about, because it's not about anything exactly. And it gives us an opportunity to get into all of these challenging topics with each other. So yeah, for me, it is really about conversation and creating that dialogue.
And then another one from Ella. Do you have human content in any of your art, or humans interacting with animals?
I don't, but the animals are really placeholders for human. They're all allegorical for the human experience. We're really supposed to see ourselves in these animals. So yeah, they're more allegorical to the human experience.
Okay, that's it for now.
Okay.
So another question I had was the placement of, you emphasize, you do have some healthy foods and such.
They're very beautiful, your pictures.
Yes,
Thank
they
you.
are. So you have, but you have some healthy foods, but you have a lot of desserts in here. And I wanted to revisit that question about millennial anxiety and such. Is that meant to be or is it, am I completely off track? Is that a different reasoning for using treats versus healthy food? Or, we all have a love-hate relationship with sweets and donuts, and I'm particularly addicted to donuts, as all my coworkers can attest. Does that play into it? Into what drives your choice in which foods that you're?
So this conversation about cake is this totally man-made thing, and it's how we've taken food and a variety of ingredients so far away from the sources, from the lives that were taken and put together to make this cake. And it's really talking about the way that we fetishize food and make it into this art piece, not only to be eaten, like actually consumed, but to be consumed visually. And that is the internet. We are constantly consuming visually. And sugar is the original drug of addiction. It's our first experience as a child with addiction is that sugar hit. And in our culture, we have this kind of strained relationship with food. Certainly in American culture, we sort of vacillate between this excess and gluttony and having everything available to us, and fast food and processed food. And on the other extreme, we have this wellness sort of health food diet culture that is like telling us an entirely different message. And also the United States, we think of as this plentiful, overabundant sort of culture, but that's not the case for everybody. We have an incredible class gap between the haves and the have-nots. So on one hand, we have this incredible excess, and we have food deserts where people don't have access to healthy food or even 3 meals a day, and that still exists in America. So I'm really talking about the class issue and this immense gap between the haves and the have-nots. And we certainly we could see that. I remember in the beginning of this pandemic in New York, what is the first thing people did when they, for those of us who had the means to do so, people ran to the grocery stores and raided the shelves and stocked up on food. And early on, there was a debate about whether we should keep our schools open. And that debate was largely because many students depend on school to get, meals during the day. So there's a big gap between who has access to enough food and quality food, which seems like it should be a human right, yet it's not available to everybody, even in America.
Hey, Christina, we have another question from the
Yeah.
chat.
Go for it.
All right, so this is from Chelsea. She says, I arrived late to the party, so this may have already been discussed, but she is working on the coloring sheet with the 2 birds on top of the 5-layer cake. And she said, I just noticed a weird bug on the bottom, and I was wondering what that was about. I noticed my own emotions showing up with that bug there.
Your own emotions showing up with a bug, right? You were like, oh, what's this doing here? You had some emotion about it, right? Based on this preconceived idea about what a bug is. It's a pest. It's a thing to be exterminated, to be gotten rid of, that we don't want anywhere near our food, and it's evocative of something that is perhaps revolting. But this is like how we have assigned value to living beings on Earth, right? Some living creatures with a will to live, who exist on this planet, in this food chain, for whatever reason, are repulsive to us. And that's an interesting thing to ask ourselves, why? Why do we look at it that way? So it's really just to get you to think about where things fall on this hierarchy and why.
And also kind of this one is really intricate with all the food in it. But this is the first time I've seen, I mean, I've looked at all of these quite a bit, but this is the first time I've seen the cheeseburgers. And I haven't really seen it I haven't delved into a lot of particularly your newer works, but I hadn't seen the cheeseburgers kind of pop up. So in this one, and I'll go ahead and zoom out, kind of why most of these are treats and then sprinkling of healthy food, but in the healthy food section, then you have the cheeseburgers. Is that another commentary on the unequal access? Yeah,
it's giving, for sure. And I think in that corner, it's like a cake, an artichoke, a steak tartare. I like, I know what's in that corner. Yeah, there's a little steak tartare in there. There's artichokes, there's cake, there's watermelon, there's cheeseburgers, there's, oh my God, there's pie, there's cupcakes, there's those poached eggs. It's these things that are juxtaposed with each other that seem totally absurd and should never go together and would never go together in reality, but that's the internet. We vacillate on the internet constantly between things that are utterly horrific to us in one post to something that is, lets us escape, that we consume visually. And we're always in this back and forth, this emotional roller coaster between different kinds of content that doesn't necessarily make sense together, but it sort of begins to overlap in our brains.
So this is the 2 that are at AEIVA do have deceased animals in it. Mm-hmm. But then a lot of the other ones that we've been looking at have not. So is this a more direct to the food as animal, or animals as pets versus animals as food, or and these were painted in 2019, but then mm-hmm. How has your work shifted into 2020?
So I mean, they all have some aspect of horror in them, it may not necessarily be the whole weight of the composition, but I mean, this one, sure, there's a lot of dead things that are sort of at the forefront compositionally, and you get a lot of mixed emotions, I think, with certain animals. With elephants, we don't, at least here, we don't really look at elephants as like a thing to be consumed. Depictions of, I mean, elephants are supposed to be these very intelligent creatures. We are sort of fascinated by them. But I think I was studying poachers for this painting. But to answer your question, how's the work shifted? I mean, through the whole quarantine, I've been working on my upcoming solo show, which is opening this September. And aside from the 2 paintings that are in a la carte, that's what all of this work is for. It is for the upcoming show, which is called Ephemeroptera. And the idea of Ephemeroptera really expands on all of these ideas of this work that I've been working on. But for those of you that don't know, the term Ephemeroptera is an order of insects, and it is specifically the mayfly. And the mayfly, there's many species of mayfly, but it's a little fly that lives for one day. And when you understand an animal with the lifespan of a day, it really brings into clarity our own mortality. We can comprehend a day for sure. We may not be able to comprehend 50 years, 100, 1,000 years, but one day, one spin of the earth brings into clarity the ephemeral nature of life. And this painting that we're looking at right now there are 2 paintings in the show of this series. This is a smaller one, and it's called Freak Shake Mountain. And this one is Freak Shake Mountain in white. And it's a study of this massive
Can you
landfill.
show the painting, please?
Yeah, can you see it?
No, I do not.
Amanda, can you jump in and walk her through the, yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah.
I'm sorry, I wasn't trying to interrupt.
No, it's okay.
And I'll message you. I'll message you.
Thank you.
Yeah, just
So,
make sure that you can shift the picture to the shared screen one. But yeah, go for it, Christina. Sorry.
So Freak Shake Mountain, the Freak Shake Mountain series, it's really a pile of cakes in a landfill, and it's meant to be overwhelming. The Freak Shake Mountain composition, it has no breaks. It's meant to be overwhelming and nauseating, and there's no rest for the viewer. And it's talking about a society about to topple, and it's really talking about the vast divide between the haves and the have-nots. It's the sugar that we consume visually, like the internet. It lures us in, the addiction to consumption that lures us in, but to our own demise, and we can't stop. So, you know, this idea of Ephemeroptera, the mayfly, it's not glamorous, it's not Instagrammable, it's a tiny little fly that lives for a day, and that is what allows you to see your own mortality. Our lives seem like a long time to us, but to the world, we are essentially a mayfly. We're here and we're gone. And to the world, society is a mayfly. Oh, we're looking at a different painting now.
Oh, sorry. I can go back. There we go.
But yeah, I mean, this is really, this Freak Shake Mountain painting is really talking about the society that is so overloaded with excess. And there is such a vast divide between the have-nots. We're wondering, is this the sort of flowering of the society, the peak, before it sort of unravels and topples? And I think we're definitely asking these questions right now. We're in a time where, in a global pandemic, where we have been faced, many of us prematurely, with thoughts of our own mortality. And it's a very weird thing to reckon with. So we're at a time where we're like really, I think, thinking about what it means to relitigate our relationship with nature, the planet, and with one another.
Yeah, so I think you sent me the picture of the second one, so I'm going to fast forward to that one real quick?
Sure. Yeah.
We'll come back to all of these others, you guys. Did it go to the very end? There it is. Oop, I don't know what I just did. My apologies. Uh-oh, I lost it. There it goes. Okay, it'll stay now. So this is the second one. So the first one was the smaller. Can you tell us for scale, because we're all seeing this on the computer, what do you mean by small? Because I was just in the galleries today and I got to see your paintings in real life. So what are you defining as small, and then what is large?
So the smaller one that we just looked at in white, that is 48 by 36, and that is the smallest painting in this upcoming solo show that I have it. Guys, forgot to mention this. It is September 19th this month. It's in Houston, Texas at Nancy Littlejohn Fine Art. So that's what the work that we're looking for is for this upcoming show. And this painting that we're looking at is Freak Shake Mountain. And this was the first piece I did exploring this idea of this landfill of cakes and all of the points that I just discussed about it. And so you guys understand this is a 10-foot painting. Okay, it is 10 feet wide by 8 feet tall. So in person, it's an overwhelming sort of monstrosity. Like, it is nauseating. There is no rest there. It is utterly indecipherable, and it is meant to be a color abstraction. And then when you zoom in, you can really see that there are countless individual cakes and desserts, and it's really, really talking about the sort of landfill of content that is the internet, that is our collective unconscious.
So I think this would be a really good point to ask. Can you tell us about your process? So this is 10 feet by 8 feet. And like, how do you kind of get to this? How do you plan this out?
Oh my God. Well, this one in particular, how do you plan this one out? How I planned this one out, this one took me a year to plan out just in the computer, because I had this idea a year ago, and I knew, and it took me a lot of time just to work it out digitally, how how the composition was even gonna sit. So, I mean, I compiled countless images from searching. I mean, my image library in my computer is endless. I'm adding to it every day. So I sourced like however many images it took to make this painting, and I chopped them all up and mashed them up digitally in Photoshop before I painted it. And that took a really long time, because this is obviously a very complicated composition. And then I had to resolve the questions of like, how do I paint this thing? And who am I referencing? What am I thinking about? What does it mean in paint? So if you see this thing in person, you see that in the front of it, a lot of the cakes get tighter and they're more in focus, and you can see them. And as they go back, they start to disintegrate. And as we get to the top, they get looser and more abstract, and the paint starts to get really thick as they sort of disintegrate off into space. But it is meant to just be this never-ending color abstraction that is talking about all of these ideas.
Christina, we've got a couple of questions in the chat.
Yeah.
So from Cynthia, personal question here. How does your food story intersect with your work? For example, are you vegetarian?
Oh, yeah. People ask me that a lot. So for me personally, I'm not a vegetarian. I'm not a vegan. You know what? I understand that food is an incredibly emotional thing. And I understand that every single person has their own relationship with food. I mean, it is a deeply personal, deeply emotional thing. And so many things go into that for each individual person. For me personally, what I try to do, because I believe that we're designed to eat meat, although we don't have to. I just try and source my food as sustainably as I can and as cruelty-free. as possible. So like, you know, for example, my parents raise chickens, and they have like a bunch of chickens that they keep in their yard, and they live a wonderful life, and they're just pets who happen to lay eggs. And they're awesome. And that's like how we get our eggs, right? So I have different ways of trying to be thoughtful about how I source my food.
Awesome. And then from Anthony, the detail in your work is beautifully obsessive and amazing. How long do some of your works take to complete, and how do you know when it is complete?
Oh, okay. Well, you know, it's hard to say how long they take because my process is ongoing. I'm always sort of in the computer. Like even when I'm home at night, like relaxing, I'm scrolling through my phone, going through like going down like internet rabbit holes, looking at images that'll take me to articles, and then I'm doing reading and research. So I'm forever sourcing images and sort of reading and getting ideas. I have, you know, the Photoshop process. It depends on how, you know, how stuck I am. Sometimes I nail it and the piece sort of clicks for me in the computer. And then, you know, sometimes I'm struggling with it and it takes more time. And then painting, it could take weeks to months, depending on how large it is. But like Freak Shake Mountain, like I said before, that took me a year to really figure out and resolve. So that was a really long one. And some go faster.
Do you work on multiple ones at the same time?
You know what? I tend to do one at a time because these are such intense paintings with so much information. I really need to devote all of my focus to one at a time because they really take so much out of me, like psychologically, physically, emotionally.
So that brings me to an interesting question then. How does your kind of in your spare time, not that you have much of it, as a boxer play into that? Does it play into like the process more? Does it play into the paintings more? So
the boxing thing, I boxed for a really long time. I don't have as much time to do it anymore because I mean, free time, I don't have free time really. I'm like, being an artist is a 24/7 sort of a thing. It's not like going to a job and then suddenly you get to go home and you leave work at work. This is your life's work. It is who you are. It is so much a part of you that it becomes a 24/7 thing. But the boxing, you know what? I started boxing years ago on like a random whim. I was like, oh, I want to get in shape. And what's like the fastest, hardest way that I can do that? And I'm like, oh, boxing, that seems like a really intense workout and I can get in shape really fast. So I walked into a boxing gym in my neighborhood and just signed up and started doing the workouts, and I loved it. And I would see all of these amateur and pro fighters sparring in the ring, and I thought like, oh, that looks cool. I can do that. That looks fun. They look like gladiators. I'm like, I can try that. And I'm going to tell you, when you're doing pad work with your trainer, you're hitting the bag and you think you look good, it is not the same as getting in the ring and being hit and hitting a moving target. So boxing really prepared me for being an artist, for learning how to struggle through things and deal with ambiguity. So the first time I got into that ring, my very first time sparring, I got punched in the face for the first time, and it was like shock that came over me. I'd like never experienced anything like that in my life. I was stunned, but I dealt with it and I tried to get through the end of the sparring and not totally embarrass myself. And after that, I had to really like sit with that. I had to process what just happened, and I had to think, am I going to get back in there and do that again, or is this too much for me? And I ended up getting back in, and again and again and again in that gym every day, and I took beatdown after beatdown until I started figuring it out. I started getting good, and I started winning. And when you get in a boxing ring, you know, you think it's you facing an opponent, and it is really you facing you. You have to deal with so many things within yourself, and ask yourself, you really have to face up to yourself. You're asking questions like, what am I holding on to? What am I willing to let go of? And it is virtually, it's analogous to being an artist. Being an artist, you're always in the state of ambiguity. When you're working on a piece and you're asking questions, is this good? Is this resolved? And you're constantly, and then sometimes, you know, you don't get the piece or you're struggling with it and you have to make choices like, do I suffer through this? How do I persevere through this? How do I get to the finish line? How do I resolve this? So it gave me a lot of resilience and a lot of willpower and willingness and ability to be okay with struggling through things sometimes. And it gave me a real sense of violence and competition, and I understand that very intimately. And I think about that as well when I look at all of these relationships on our planet and the animal kingdom and humans and animals and humans and plants. It all sort of comes into play, those experiences.
Christina, I know we only have a couple more minutes, but we do have one more question, if that's
Sure.
okay. From Anthony, watermelons seem to be a common thread in your works. What is the thematic inspiration?
Oh, yeah. Okay. So I did mention that I do talk about the maternal instinct a lot. And watermelons are actually very personal for me. I mean, first of all, I'm visually sort of, I choose things that I fixate on visual and I love the look of. But watermelons for me are kind of a very personal sort of self-portrait. They remind me of my earliest memories with my mom. And I'm fortunate to be incredibly close with my mom. And, you know, growing up as a little kid, it's my earliest memories of summer, of my birthday parties. If you see pictures of me as a kid, I'm in like always like watermelon print outfits because she loves watermelon. And you know, the first birthday party that I can remember, she made me this like incredible watermelon cake that she did, like homemade, and it was like green and pink and awesome. So that it's very much linked to memory for me. So it's emotional, and food is emotional. Food is linked to memory for so many of us. I'm sure all of us can think of a food or experience with a food that feels like home, that feels like somebody we love, that reminds us of growing up, that reminds us of a family member. And sometimes they're great memories and sometimes they're not so great. But the point is food carries a lot of emotional weight for us.
Absolutely. Well, this has been awesome. I can't believe we're already out of time. Thank you so much. Let me stop screen sharing and share, and then we'll go to gallery view. If everyone can hold up what you were working on during this, go ahead and turn on your cameras and show us, and then we'll get a screenshot. And awesome, fantastic, you guys. Oh, I love it. This is amazing.
Cool.
I love everyone's take on these. So thank you, Christina, so much for joining us tonight. You guys can see her artwork again on Tuesday, September 8th, which is this coming Tuesday. Make sure that you sign up for that. And if you missed it in the chat, we will you can visit our website and sign up that way. So we hope to see you all again on Tuesday or at one of our future coloring nights. The next one is October 1st. And I'd
like to join.
Great. Definitely make sure that you sign up. So thank you again, Christina. And
Yeah,
we
thank
look forward to seeing you all. Oh, and before I forget, if you guys worked on the artwork and you're on Instagram or Facebook, be sure to post this to your stories and tag us at AEIVA UAB. So that's AEIVA UAB, and then tag Christina as well. And it's just at Christina Nicodema. Is that correct?
Yeah, that's it. That's on my Instagram handle.
Yes, awesome. Yes, and thank you, Tina, for putting it in the chat. So thank you so much. I'm so happy to have had you here, and thank you to everyone who came, and we hope to see you again either on Tuesday or one of our future events.